Hey guys, welcome back to Interesting Andrew. I'm still reading Summa Theologica. I'm very tongue-tied, and I accidentally ended the video, and so this will be part 2 now. I'm sorry. I like to try and keep it one video, but unfortunately I messed it up somehow. So we are on the replies to the objections of question 12, article 4. Just see where we're at. We'll just start at objection 1, and if it overlaps a little bit, forgive me. So, reply to objection 1. This mode of knowing God is natural to an angel, namely, to know him by his own likeness refulgent in the angel itself. But to know God by any created similitude is not to know the essence of God, as shown above in Article 2. Hence, it does not follow that an angel can know the essence of God by his own power. Okay, so because they're working for God, he's going to give them the capacity to know him, but that's through his own doing. It's not through their natural capacity. Because with him being the first principle, they by nature would not ever be able to comprehend. Neither would we. And it's only through his ability, through God making it so, that it's even possible. Okay, so reply to objection 2. The angelic intellect is not defective. If defect be taken to mean privation, as if it were without anything which it ought to have. But if the defect be taken negatively, in that the sense of every creature is defective when compared with God, forasmuch as it does not possess the excellence which is in God. Again, because he's the first principle, and everything is derived from there. And so a part or a created being that no matter how high up it is on that hierarchy of intellect and everything, because it's less than the highest, which would be God, it's going to have natural limitations to be able to comprehend that's what's higher. Reply to objection 3. The sense of sight, as being altogether material, cannot be raised up to immateriality. But our intellect, or the angelic intellect, inasmuch as it is elevated above matter in its own nature, can be raised up above its own nature to a higher level of grace. The proof is that sight cannot in any way know abstractly what it knows concretely. For in no way can it perceive a nature except as this one particular nature, whereas our intellect is able to consider abstractedly what it knows concretely. Now, although it knows things which have a form residing in matter, still it resolves a composite into both of these elements, and it considers the form separately by itself. Likewise also the intellect of an angel, although it naturally knows the concrete in any nature, still it is able to separate the existence by its intellect, since it knows that the thing itself is one thing and the existence is another. Since, therefore, the created intellect is naturally capable of apprehending the concrete form of a concrete thing being abstractedly, by way of a kind of resolution of parts, it can by grace be raised up to know separate subsisting substance and separate subsisting existence. Holy crap! That's a tongue-tied sentence if I've ever seen one. One interesting thing, also, going to something like simulation theory, or just consciousness in general, it cannot be measured. You cannot point to a brain and say that is consciousness. That is the self. And so I've always kind of used that also for being analogous for explaining to people the divine. In simulation theory, it would point to that, there is an existence of ourselves outside of this body, almost as if The body is the drone, and the consciousness, or the soul, the self, is actually outside of the simulation, and then eternal versus the simulation. Consciousness, too, in the same way, with it not being able to be actually mapped concretely or anything. Like, we can see the firing of synapses in the brain, the neurons, but that is not consciousness. They have yet to find a way to actually say that is your consciousness. I say harkens to the idea of the soul and of us being of a dual nature, of being corporeal and incorporeal, or of having a physical form and of a, in essence, that of, angelic or heavenly. So, just my thoughts. And no, we're not angels. Angels are very different from us. Whether the created intellect needs any created light in order to see the essence of God. No. No. I don't know if I even want to bother with this one. Okay. Objection 1. It seems that the created intellect does not need any created light in order to see the essence of God. For what is of itself lucid in all sensible things does not require any other light to be in order to be seen. Therefore, the same applies to intelligible things. Now, God is intelligible light. Therefore, he is not seen by means of any created light. Further, if God is seen through a medium, he is not seen in his essence. But if seen by any created light, he is seen through a medium. Therefore, he is not seen in his essence. I could see as kind of like they say, you see through a lens, as we had just read. If you're seen through visual light, that is a medium. That is something that will offer some form of interference to the actual essence of God. But maybe I'll be wrong. Further, what is created can be natural to some creature. Therefore, if it is the essence of God is seen through any created light, such a light can be made natural to some other creature, and thus that creature would not need any other light to see God, which is impossible. Therefore, if it is not necessary that every creature should require a superadded light in order to see the essence of God. On the contrary, it is written, "In thy light we shall see light." Psalm 35:10. I answer that everything which is raised up to what exceeds its nature must be prepared by some disposition above its nature. For example, if air is to receive the form of fire, it must be prepared by some disposition for such form. But when any created intellect sees the essence of God, the essence itself becomes the intelligible form of the intellect. Hence, it is necessary that some supernatural disposition should be added to the intellect in order that it may be raised up to such a great sublime height. Now, since the natural power of the created intellect does not avail to enable it to see the essence of God, as was shown in the preceding article, it is necessary that the power of understanding should be added by divine grace. Now, this increase in intellectual power is called the illumination of the intellect, as we also call the intelligible object itself by the name of the light of illumination. And this is the light spoken of in the Apocalypse 21:23. The glory of God hath enlightened it, the society of the blessed who see God. By the light of the blessed are made deiform, like to God, according to the saying, when he shall appear, we shall be like him. We shall see him as he is. 1 John 3:2. Okay, so by being glorified gives us that ability, which we've already talked about. Reply to objection 1. The created light is necessary to see the essence of God, not in order to make the essence of God intelligible, which is of itself intelligible, but in order to enable the intellect to understand in the same way as a habit makes a power abler to act. Even so, corporeal light is necessary as regards to external sight, inasmuch as it makes a medium actually transparent or susceptible to color. Okay. Reply to objection 2. This light is required to see the divine essence not as a similitude in which God is seen, but as a perfection of the intellect strengthening it to see God. Therefore, it may be said that the light is to be described not as a medium in which God is seen, but as one by which he is seen, and such a medium does not take away from the immediate vision of God. Reply to objection 3. The disposition to the form of fire can be natural only to the subject of that form. Hence, the light of glory cannot be natural to the creature unless the creature has a divine nature, which is impossible. But by the light to the rational creature is made deiform, as is said in this article. Okay. Whether of those who see the essence of God, this would be question 12, article 6. Whether of those who, on page 125, I'm sorry. Whether of those who see the essence of God, one sees more perfectly than another. Objection 1. It seems that those who see the essence of God, one does not see more perfectly than another. For it is written in 1 John 3:2, we shall see him as he is, but he is only in one way. Therefore, he will be seen by all in one way only, and therefore he will not be seen more perfectly by one and less perfectly by another. Objection 2. Further, Augustine says, one person cannot see one and the same thing more perfectly than another, but all who see the essence of God understand the divine essence, for God is seen by the intellect and not by sense, as was shown above in Article 3. Therefore, of those who see the divine essence, one does not see more clearly than another. Well, I would refute that if that were true, they wouldn't reject it. But maybe I'm wrong. Objection 3. Further, that anything that be seen more perfectly than another can happen in two ways, either on the part of the visible object or the part of the visual power of the seer. On the part of the object, it may so happen because the object is received more perfectly in the seer. That is, according to the greater perfection of the similitude. But this does not apply to the present question, for God is present to the intellect, seeing him not by way of similitude, but by his essence. If it follows then that if one sees him more perfectly than another, this happens according to the difference of the intellectual power. Thus it follows too that the one of the intellectual powers higher will see him more clearly. And this is incongruous, since equality with the angels is promised to men as their beatitude. On the contrary, eternal life consists in the vision of God according to John 17:3. This is eternal life, that they may know thee, the only true God. Therefore, if all saw the essence of God equally in the eternal life, all would be equal. On the contrary, to which is declared by the apostle, star differs from star in glory. 1 Corinthians 15:41. I answer that, of those who see the essence of God, one sees him more perfectly than another. This indeed does not take place as if one had a more perfect similitude of God than another, since that vision will not spring from any similitude, but it will take place because of one's intellect will have a greater power or faculty to see him than another. The faculty of seeing God, however, does not belong to the created intellect naturally, but it is given to it by the light of glory, which establishes the intellect as a kind of deiformity, as appears from what is said above in the preceding article. Hence, intellect, which has more of the light of glory, will see God more perfectly, and he will have a fuller participation in the life of glory, who has more charity, because where there is greater charity, there is more desire, and in desire, in a certain degree, makes the one desiring apt and prepared to receive the object desired. Hence, he who possesses the more charity will see God more perfectly and will be more beatified. I think at this point I'm going to have to stop because my tongue is very tired and I'm losing my voice. So I think that is enough for question 12. Maybe I'll come back to it. I'll read it. But for now, I think that'll be the end of part 2. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. It's been interesting, Andrew.